bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime with the Hockey Writers. My name is Jim Parsons. We've got our full cast of crew today with us to talk all of the new happenings in Edmonton and with the Oilers, because there's lots of stuff going on here. New coach, some player changes, personnel changes, all sorts of stuff. So we're going to talk about that and more today. We've got Colton Pankey with us. Colton, how you doing?
I'm good, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's always good when you record a video after 3 wins in a row. I mean, you can't complain about that, right? And we'll see if it lasts. Julian Mangilo's with us. Julian, how are you?
I'm doing good. You guys got to get that energy up. We're on a 3-game win streak here. You know, we're buzzing right now.
Yeah, he's excited. Let's hope that the excitement can last, right? That's the real test with the Oilers, is how long can they maintain things. They've had a number of streaks in a row, but they start like 11-2 or something crazy, and then they went 5-0-1 and then lost 7. Like, they're streaky, this team. We'll see if they can get another streak going. And Brian Swain is with us as well. Brian, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Yeah, it just contrast this to where we were doing this last week. Yeah, this team, man, it is a roller coaster.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about the new coaching change. We're going to talk about the goaltending situation. We'll talk about some of the player changes and personnel changes at nice time and all that other stuff. Before we do that, though, just a quick reminder for anybody watching this video, sign up for the morningskate.io newsletter at the Hockey Writers. If you're interested in getting your daily buzz, your hits, your quick nuggets of news in terms of the NHL, keeping up with all stories, all articles on the Hockey Writers, including the NHL trade deadline, which is coming up right away, you definitely want to sign up for the morningskate.io newsletter. And this show will be brought to you by that newsletter, so make sure you check it out. Okay. Let's start with the coaching change, because that's obviously the big news. Colton, I'll start with you. Jay Woodcroft comes in. He's promoted from Bakersfield. Dave Tippett is let go because of, we assume, the 2 games that they lost coming out of the All-Star break. Now, obviously, there's more to it than just 2 games, but it was a very, very bad 2 games. So Woodcroft comes in, and they're 3-0 under Jay Woodcroft. So my question to everybody, and I'll start with you, is what is your first impression, take away from the 3 games that Jay Woodcroft has coached here?
Well, I think we kind of talked about, last week too. Generally, when a new coach comes in, it seems to spark a group. Like we've seen that with Boudreau there and in Vancouver. And I think right now, like the biggest thing is it's the games that they're winning. It seems like they're in pretty good control of them. Like I think their defensive play has been a lot better. You've seen players say that there's more attention to detail. I don't know if you guys caught Warren Fogel's comments that some people thought were maybe throwing a bit of shade at Tippett, saying that it seems like they know what they're doing now as opposed to before. So I think that like just defensive play has been a lot better, and then they're getting goaltending too, which obviously helps. But yeah, so far so good.
So a better structure, better role assignments, better player assignments, I guess.
Is exactly.
Okay. So yeah. That's true. I agree with you. I've seen that for sure. Julian, are you seeing the same thing? Do you have something else? What's your biggest takeaway so far from his coaching, the 3 games that he's coached?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is just the amount of, you're always going to get that residual off the firing. And that's kind of, we'll take that for granted. But I was kind of a little bit on the negative side when it all happened, because I thought it would take time to get, a new system under their belt. And it hasn't been that way, which has been great. And I think what's helped is, the familiarity of some of the players and Woodcroft's system from the minors. So I think that makes the transition a little bit better. But overall, I just like the way he spread out the minutes. It's not guys just being relied on over and over again, and a large discrepancy in shifts and minutes on the ice. I think he's done a good job finding a balance between using all the players. And their biggest thing I see is they're playing with a purpose. Like it seems like everybody knows their role, their job, and what they should be doing and where they should be in order to, break out or protect their net, or where to go on offense. Like they're crashing the net, they're driving the net, they're creating chances, not from the perimeter. They're getting to the net and they're getting some dirtier goals, and they're just playing with purpose. And that's the biggest thing I found.
Yeah, you mentioned the familiarity, and I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, how many of the players that are on this roster does he not know? Like, I mean, he knows them now, but like, who are we talking about here? Tyson Berry, maybe Warren Fogle, Derek Ryan. I mean, there's so few players that he hasn't had some sort of relationship with, whether it was an assistant coach under Todd McClellan, whether it was Bakersfield coach, whether it was in San Jose where he worked with Evander Kane. Like, there's he's had a relationship with almost everybody on his team, right? So I'm totally with you. Like going internally and finding a coach who has some sort of relationship, but maybe not so ingrained in what Tippett was doing that he's still going to do his own thing. That's what I'm noticing too. Brian, what about you?
I'll piggyback on Julian's point there that the consistency in the shifts that they're getting, and not only that, the consistency in the lines and the deep pairings. We haven't really seen him throw everything into a blender. They've been playing pretty much consistently with the same line combinations and same deep pairings now for all three of these games. And I think, you see the fruits of that familiarity with one another, just knowing that, okay, if something doesn't work out this period, we're not going to be all the lines aren't going to be shaken up in the second period. So that is one thing. I just think the consistency in the lineup, like Julian says, with the shift distribution and who they're playing with. And another quick thing that I found fascinating is this 11-7 lineup combination that I think has worked really well. It's protected the younger D. They haven't been exposed. No one's had to play in situations that they're out of their depth. And it hasn't seemed to hurt the forwards unit at all. I mean, last night, Shore only played like 2.5 minutes.
Yep.
So they effectively ran with 10 forwards, and I didn't notice anybody being fatigued.
Yeah, well, there's definitely, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, the ice time with some of these forwards. And when you consider, like you said, that there's only 11 of them, you would think some of your main guys, their ice time would go up. And that is the opposite of what is happening. They're going down. But I'm with you, the 7 defensemen. Now, I will ask you this, Brian, how much of this is because Duncan Keith isn't there? And how much of this is because Woodcroft just likes to do this? Because he does like to do this. There is a game he played one time in Bakersfield where he had 9 defensemen playing. Like, this is a thing that he does. So will it change when Duncan Keith comes back, do you think?
I don't think so necessarily, because like you say, this is what he does. I'm going to be curious to watch, but I don't necessarily think they're mutually exclusive. This is his MO, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense with Keith being out of the lineup right now. So it's not something we've seen a lot of here. And I think we all kind of looked at it when he rolled out the 11-7 combination the first night and thought, but it's working. It's working very well.
Talking about the defenseman, Colton, how much do you think is this Dave Manson's doing too? Like, I'm assuming that Woodcroft, I don't know if he said, hey, we want to come in and I want to come in with Dave Manson, or if Ken Holland was already looking at Jim Playfair going, you know what, there's a problem here. Like, our penalty kill's been awful. Our defensive coverage has been terrible. We're leaking dangerous chances. I mean, if Tippett's going, Playfair's going too. Or if Woodcroft says, yeah, I'm coming, I'm happy to come, but Manson's got to come with me. Because how much of this do you think is Dave Manson's doing? Because there's a guy who's been and done everything. He's played every type of style of defenseman that you play in the NHL, from power play quarterback to stay-at-home defenseman to beat the crap out of the guy kind of defenseman. Like, he's done it all. So how much of this is Dave Manson's doing, do you think?
Yeah, exactly. You said it. I think lots of times we see now with coaches, especially kind of in the newer era here, that lots of them have the playing experience and they can kind of walk the walk, talk the talk sort of thing. And I think that was a big problem. Like I said, I think the attention to detail has been better, especially defensively. And I think that's definitely helped with that. I think, like you said, the penalty kill was struggling just defensively when they kind of fell into this funk after that 16-5 start. Obviously, a lot of it was talked about with the goaltenders, but I think defensive play had a lot to do with kind of their breakdowns and goals against too. So I think it's something that won't hurt by any means. It's a change that had to happen, and so far, so good.
Julian, do you think this lasts? Like, we've talked about the buzz that you get when you get a new coach, like the Bruce Boudreau effect, we called it, I think, last week, right? Does this last with Woodcroft? Is this the kind of thing where they're just getting this spark and people are playing different types of hockey, at least style-wise, defensively, coverage-wise? Or is this going to sort of fizzle out like a lot of new coaching hires do you think?
I was talking with Brian yesterday quick, and I was saying that I didn't even think they were going to win yesterday, the back-to-back, and I was a little bit weary on it. And they pulled through. So I think at this point I have to buy in. I've been a little bit pessimistic, so I'm going to turn it full 360 and say that I think it lasts. I think as they continue to grow in the system, get familiar with the players and what their roles are going to be. I think it just kind of all works itself out. And, as long as they can get the goaltending and some consistency there, I think the consistency is the biggest thing. And having, like we've talked about already, just the consistent D pairings. I think we'll see what happens kind of when Duncan Keith starts to come back in the mix. And I think that the key looks to be that you involve more players and take less loads off of people's shoulders. I think that's going to be the key in their success and continuing the success, is letting everybody shoulder the load rather than a group of 5 guys.
I am curious, like we're remodeling my kitchen here, and you probably can't hear it happening right now, but I was talking to the guy that was doing the kitchen stuff, and he's like, yeah, you're doing the Oilers writing, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And he's like, okay, well, I have to ask you this question. What do you think about the way McDavid and Draisaitl play their all-around game? Because Mark Spector wrote an article that was pretty scathing on both McDavid and Draisaitl, and talked about how they need to learn to play better defense. I'm seeing that already. I'm seeing some changes under Woodcroft. I'm seeing the way that they're collapsing, coming down. Mm-hmm. I am very curious, though, as to whether or not they maintain that. I'm curious to see if the winning leads them to go, man, like, remember, like, Yzerman had that moment where he just sort of realized, I got to play two-way hockey. Ovechkin sort of had that moment where he played like 12 years and was super offensive. Then all of a sudden he's like, man, if I play two-way hockey, we can actually win the Stanley Cup here. I wonder if that's going to happen with McDavid and Draisaitl, and they just go, you know what, this works. Like, this is one of those things where if we collapse down the middle, we get back, we play solid two-way hockey, we're win. Even if we play less minutes, play less everything. Like, I'm curious to see whether it happens. We'll touch on that in a minute, but I want to go to Brian because I know how much he's in support of Stuart Skinner, and Stuart Skinner's played great. He got a shutout, first one in the NHL. I think one of the, like, what is it, top 4, top 5? You might know the stat. Quickest Oilers goalies to get a shutout as a player, as a goaltender, did it really quickly. They set him down because Mikko Koskinen is back now. He's off the COVID protocol list. He's ready to go, and Ken Holland is going with Smith and Koskinen. So I'll go to you first. What is your immediate reaction to the Skinner going back to the AHL news?
Well, you hit on it right there. I'm not surprised. And I don't know if that was a Freudian slip or if you meant to say it, but you said Ken Holland has decided who he's going with. So
no, I said that on purpose. Because
okay.
I think Woodcroft, I'm curious to see what happens here. Like, when Keith is ready, with Koskinen back, when Zach Kassian's back, like, what does Woodcroft do when he's got some choices at his disposal, right? Right now, a lot of what he's doing, he might not have those choices, but Ken Holland has said publicly, he's doing these 2 goalies. These are his guys. Yeah. So Skinner goes down by default, right? So I said that on purpose. I think Holland is the one that made this call, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, then we talked about this last week, is what level of autonomy here does Woodcroft have in making lineup decisions? And I think this kind of indicates that a little bit. He might have decided the same thing too, but I'm not surprised. Before all this went down, when Tippett was still a coach, that, they'd already sent Skinner back down and were ready to roll with Koskinen and Smith. So that's what they committed to. That's what they bought into. And you know what? All 3 of them in their most recent starts have played very well. Before he went into protocol, Koskinen played very well. Smith has had a very good couple of games. I don't know if there's been an occasion when all 3 of them have actually all been playing good at the same time. So
I don't know if all 3 have ever played at the same time. Like, none of them have been able to, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you haven't had a choice. It's just, you got 2, you got 1, you got, like, last year, none, right? Where there was nobody. Like, it was, yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in short, I'm just not surprised. I think he deserves more of an opportunity than he's getting, of course, but that's the way it is right now. Koskinen comes off the books at the end of the year. Maybe he's traded before the deadline, and the opportunity comes sooner rather than later.
Colin, do you think this is a mistake? Do you think, I mean, there's an argument that they can be made right now, and Brian says all 3 have played well, and he's right, but Stuart Skinner has played fairly well. So is this a mistake by the Oilers to send down what might be the hottest of the 3 goalies?
I think just given the way Smith has played in his last couple starts, and the fact that Koskinen, before being put on COVID protocol list, was starting to play better, makes it easier. But at the same time, if they start to struggle again, like, I wonder how short their leash is before they call Skinner back up, because he's been the best of the 3 this year, at least on a consistent level. And I think he just gets the short end of the stick, obviously being waiver exempt. And I don't know. I would have liked to have seen him stay up, just because I think he's deserved it. He's played the best out of the 3. And I'd like Brian said, I think it was predictable, but I think that he's earned every chance to keep getting starts for this team.
Julian, the one thing I will say is that if he goes down to the AHL, he's going to play like crazy, right? If he stays with the Oilers and Smith and Koskinen are both healthy, and he can't really do that anyway. He can't really keep 3 goalies now. There's no taxi squad or anything like that. But if he goes down to the AHL, he's going to play. And he's going to play a lot. And he played fantastic in Bakersfield. So is that the good silver lining here? Is that the glasses half full takeaway from this? Is that he's going down, he's going to play like crazy, and he'll be fresh when he probably inevitably gets called back up again.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be long. And I think I said a while ago that I just like to see him go back and just let him sit down there, even when everything was in turmoil, just to make sure that he stays confident and he knows what, his job is. Just so he doesn't get too down on himself. But, he's played great, but I just think it's about roster construction and just managing the cap right now and roster in itself. So I wasn't really surprised that it had to happen. It's unfortunate, but right now I think Holland wants to know where he's at with Smith and Koskinen and see if this is the tandem in the situation that they now have with their new cards that they've been dealt, to see if they're going to be able to, rally around a little bit of better defensive play and see if that kind of helps the goaltending situation. And if it does, then great, because it works itself out that way. If not, I don't think it's going to be long anyway, either before a move is made or one of them is hurt again or something else happens. So I'm sure we'll see Skinner again, like you alluded to already. And I think that they're in a good situation with the 3 goalies, that they have right now, the way the defense is playing in front of them.
My hope is that Koskinen takes this positively. Where I'm going with that is that he tends to be, at least the reputation on him is that under pressure, he's not always the best performer. Now, the pressure for him is that he's one of 3 goalies, all of that played well, right? So now he's being interjected back into the lineup, taking the spot of a goaltender who's played well. There's a little bit of pressure there to go, I got to at least play as good as Skinner was playing, or I got to play as good as Smith, or otherwise I'm in kind of whatever here. I hope he can respond to that and play really well. So far, his past shows us that maybe that isn't the case. But yes, if he can continue to play the way that he played before he went on COVID protocol list, that's a good thing.
I think it's refreshing for him that he's got a kind of a fresh slate here, right? New coach, just got to prove yourself. And I think it'll be good for him to kind of get in there again and try and just, start fresh.
Yeah, for sure. Let's switch gears a little bit. Colton, I'll start with you. We talked about the 11 and 7, so 7 defensemen. Duncan Keith is out right now. A lot of guys have struggled, but some guys have really stepped up here since Woodcroft took over. Is there one of the 7 defensemen that has been a standout for you that has kind of said, you know what, I've really noticed him in the last few games? I'm curious how many of us have the same answer here, but I'll start with you.
Well, I don't know if you guys have the same answer, and I don't know if it's kind of a cheating one, but I think just because I think he'd been kind of struggling since Christmas, and he's looked really strong in these past few games. So I'm just going to say Darnell Nurse. I think with that extension kicking in next year, they really need him to perform like a truly elite number 1 defenseman. And I think he was really struggling kind of as the team struggled, which I don't think is really a coincidence. They need him to be at his best if they want to be successful. And these past few games, he's kind of playing like he did last year again. So I'm hoping that sticks. So he's been the one for me.
Yeah, he has been better. And you're right. He struggled, and he even admitted he hadn't played the best, but certainly it's probably going to help that he is playing a little less so far. Brian, what about you? Has there been a standout defenseman? There's a lot of good answers here. I'm curious to see where you'll go with this one.
Well, I fell in love with this dude during his first cameo with the team back just after Christmas, Marcus Niemelainen. This guy is just like, it's been a long time since the Oilers have had a defenseman like this, where he just is ready to hit anything that moves. And there's been a few guys with that attitude on the team, but none that have had his size. So, he walks tall and carries a big stick too, right? So I just love this guy. He brings a dimension to the team that certainly doesn't exist. It wasn't existing on the roster previously. And I think I think it has an impact throughout the lineup. I think that's the kind of play that really resonates throughout and can get everyone else to fire up the team.
Yeah, when you lay in a big hit, you can tell everybody is just uplifted by it, and there's a different feeling and stuff on the bench. I have a question for you though. If everyone's healthy, Duncan Keith is back, everybody's good to go. Is Niemelainen on this team still?
I think he should be.
Yeah, but I do too. But do you think he is?
Boy, there's so many defensemen now. I'd have to start going through my head who could be coming out, and I don't know. That's again a Holland Woodcroft thing. I think if Woodcroft has his druthers, he is. I think if it's a Holland decision, he's probably going back down.
I think he's going back down once everybody's healthy.
I'm going to say he doesn't. I actually believe you when you say he brings that element to the team that they don't have. And I think Colin loves it. And I think
We sent him back down before, though.
yeah, but part of that was an injury. He was he played really well in his first stint, and then he was kind of injured for a little bit, and other than that, but he's showing now in 2 showings in a row in the NHL that he's not going to change. This is the way that he plays, and the Oilers love it. Like they absolutely love it. So I don't know. I mean, especially if Woodcroft's going to go 11-7 some of the time, you might want to have him, right? Cole, what about you? Do you think he stays?
I think it's sort of, again, a situation like we just seen with Skinner where he's more than deserving to, but when everyone's healthy, I think he's still kind of the odd man out. And like Brian said, I've really liked him. He's a physical presence that they really need back there. And I would love to see him stay, but I think once everyone's healthy, he might be the odd man out again.
Yeah, if they make the playoffs, right, what are you gonna go with? A guy with experience? You're gonna go with a rookie, right? Like to me, just based on that idea alone, I think he's got to mature a little bit more before you throw him into roles like that. I like
To
to
me,
see
though,
him.
that's the kind of guy you want.
I was going to say that I would.
You
counter
do
the-
need him. I agree with you guys.
I
They
would
don't
go the
have
other way.
that. They don't have that for sure. I think that they might go out and get that with someone in the trade deadline if they are where they are in the standings and go actually get that element in another player for cheaper, for whatever pick they have to give up. Knowing they do have one in-house, but I just think that just because of the experience, it's not going to happen unless Woodcroft vouches for him.
Yeah, I would be surprised actually if they make the playoffs if he's not highly considered because of what he brings and how the game changes and how rough it can get and that kind of stuff. I would be a little bit surprised there. Okay, Julian, I'll let you pick. So Colton went with Darnell Nurse, Brian went with Nima Leinen. Who's your pick for the standout defenseman so far?
Well, I think in general that it's night and day between the way they were playing before and the way they are now. So I give credit to everybody, but I think Cece's really stepped up as one that's been standing out. Especially with the Keith injury. The first game, I think he played like 26 minutes or just over that. And they dropped off recently in the last 2 games from there, obviously, but he's provided that stability that you need with especially those younger guys in the lineup now. And he's been reliable for them and cleaned up his act defensively in his own zone a little bit more. And I think that comes with the system as well. But I think just his reliability and consistency, you know what you're going to get from him. And I think that's been a really stabilizing presence for them, especially missing a veteran like Keith.
Yeah, Woodcroft's first game, wasn't it Cece that played like 25 minutes? He played more than Nurse.
Yeah.
Like
20,
so that's a sign
something.
that there's definitely some trust there with Woodcroft and Cece. All right, just to be different and just so that I don't pick somebody that everybody else has already taken, I'm going to go with William Lagesson. I think that he has been, I wouldn't want to say a standout for me, but he's been noticeable in a good way. You know, usually when you say a defenseman isn't noticeable, that means they're doing their job and they're not, screwing you over one way or standing out, like a Tyson Berry might when he gets 1 billion points. But Lagesson's just been steady. When he's played, he's been sound defensively. He's made good reads. He's made good passes. He's been hitting the cycle. He's been stopping this. He's been doing a pretty good job for what. Now there's a guy we talk about, Nima Leinen. I think Lagesson might be the odd man out here when everybody's healthy, and he's probably going to be the guy that is first to go. But in the role that he's been given right now, in the minutes that he's been asked to play, I think he's been really good. And that's been kind of nice for me. I will give a second nod, although he hasn't been great, but I think the last game against Los Angeles is going to be a marker for him moving forward. Tyson Berry finally got a point, and I thought he played pretty good. He made a sound defensive play at the end of the game there, which is huge for his confidence. I made that poke check for, what was it, Zach Cassian or somebody got the empty netter. Yeah, so it was just a good game, which he's had not many of lately. So let's hope that that's a good sign. But I'll go with William Lagesson.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. I think he's played really well too. He, like you said, I think he'll be the odd man out, which is again unfortunate. But I think it all comes down to all these guys, like especially the defense court, have been the minutes have been divvied up so well. Like we talked, like Brian already said, that it's making everybody's job easier, right? And they know their job and they know what Woodcroft's asking of them in the AHL, and I think that's just seamless.
I will say I think Evan Bouchard's made fewer mistakes in the last 3 games than he was making prior to. He was doing some pretty, and I'd mentioned it once. He's the kind of player that'll cough up the puck in a really bad, blatant way, but then make up for it on offense. But he's been doing that less too. All right. Colton, I'll start with you on this one. We talked a little bit about the ice time and the changes with 11 and 7 and how Woodcroft has split things up. What's your take on McDavid and Draisaitl both playing less? Because their minutes have gone down, even in the game against Los Angeles, where it was really tight. It felt like a playoff game until they got those 2 empty netters. McDavid still played less than he had averaged. I think he was averaging like 23. Brian might know this. He's a good number guy. 23, 24 minutes, but he played like 21 against Los Angeles. So his numbers are going down. What do you make of that? Is that like the best news ever? Or do you think that playing these guys more is the way to go?
I like it. I think last year when they're in the playoffs, whether they were tired or just didn't perform well, they weren't very good in the postseason against the Jets. So I think giving them less ice time throughout the regular season is a good thing. And I think it helps the whole team kind of almost bond together closer too. Like we've seen a lot of players playing better right now. And I think them getting more into the game is helping a lot. Like I noticed with the empty netters the past few games, like it's not always McDavid and Draisaitl out there just kind of collecting points like we've seen for years with Tippett. So I think it's good in that sense. And it just lets everyone feel like they're a bit more part of this team, because whenever you hear about the Oilers, it's always McDavid, Draisaitl, and they don't have anything else, blah, blah, blah. So I think just having these other guys come up, step up, and be able to get more minutes is really crucial and will be really important for them down the stretch.
I see you shaking your head there, Brian. Are you in total agreement with what Colton's saying there?
Yeah, I think he makes the perfect point in that I don't look at this as them getting less minutes. I look at this as somebody else getting more minutes and more players getting a chance to be involved and contribute. And I think that's so important. And over these 3 games with Woodcroft, 9 different players have scored already. Like that is to me just a really telling stat. Colton said it. This team has gone as Draisaitl and McDavid have gone for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and that hasn't taken them very far. If this team is going to go anywhere, they're going to have to do it, top down, the entire lineup, and that's the environment that's being created here. So I think it's a good thing, and they're 3-0, so can't argue with the results so far.
What about you, Julian? How much is it a factor for the overall lineup? How much does it help McDavid and Draisaitl to be playing less, even if it's only 1 or 2 minutes less a game? Like, how big of a deal is it?
Well, I think it's the key word that Brian said was involved, right? You want to get other guys involved. And I think that's what is making it easier on everybody. And I've noticed too, that when Draisaitl does have more minutes, McDavid's about a couple minutes less than him in that game. So I actually checked some of that stats. So it's either one or the other that's getting a little bit bump in the minutes, and the other guy's kind of following suit behind him. So I kind of like that aspect where you're running one guy high one night and then one guy low the other night. And I think that keeps them fresh. But in terms of the lineups in general, like the first game, I think Benson and McLeod had like 7 minutes, and they were the only 2 guys that were under 10. Everybody else was above 10. And then the next game, I think Benson was the only one under 10 again at like 7 minutes. And then the game after that, the only one was Shore, and Fogle was at 10 minutes. So just over 10. So that there speaks volumes to me. And maybe it is because of the way they're set up with the extra defensemen. But I mean, to show the amount of trust that he's putting into the players and closing the gap between the minutes that everybody's playing, I think it's very beneficial for both a short-term and long-term, because it's almost as motivation for the team and the other guys in the group to say, okay, boys, let's go. It's not only these guys that we have to rely on. I need more from you guys too. Right. So rewarding those players and giving them the minutes is going to go farther in the long run.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that it's a Woodcroft thing that he's just kind of like, no, this is how it has to be. And not necessarily, even though I think this is important and smart, that he looks at the schedule and goes, holy moly, we got a lot of games in a short amount of time here. Right. Like, cause they've got, what was it, 8 and 13? They've played 3 of them already, and they've got, and we talked about this before we went on air here, but they have a tough schedule. Like, who'd you say, Brian? It was
Jets,
Winnipeg, Minnesota,
Wild,
Tampa, Florida, Carolina, and
Yeah.
the Florida, Carolina games are back to back, and
a little bit of a gauntlet
within a really small window, right? Like, these guys need to play less. Like, they just can't be putting these, like, you can't put McDavid out 27 minutes a game in this many games in such a short, you're just begging for an injury. Like that's what'll happen, right? Somebody will get tired. Somebody outside of them just wearing down. Somebody will get hurt. Like that's just how it's. So I think it's super smart that he's doing it. but I'm hoping that it's just his philosophy. He's like, no, we're playing these two. Like he's watching from afar in Bakersfield and he's going, they play too much. They play way too much. Like it's just, we got to get other people involved. And I'm hoping that's the case. So we'll see. Final segment of the night, the 1-and-1. We didn't do one last week because we had so much to talk about, but we'll do it this week and we'll let Julian start with it. You got a 1-and-1 for us this week?
I mean, I'll give a +1 to Mike Smith because I think he's had a tough run. That back-to-back was a little bit tough for him. He's bounced back pretty well. The injuries, he's battled through them. And I think that if he can keep doing what he's doing, like this is the Smith we saw last season where we weren't worried about the goaltending and took him to the playoffs and was able to give him, decent starts in those 4 games against Winnipeg, I think. So, I mean, credit to him if he can keep it going. And I hope Koskinen can do the same. So pushing for that, but my +1 goes to Mike Smith.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's fair for sure. Colton, what about you? Do you got a +1, a -1, or both?
I'll give the +1 to Jay Woodcroft. I mean, like we've said, they're on a 3-game win streak right now. Things appear to be turned around and on the up and up. They're right near a playoff spot again. So Woodcroft gets mine.
If I have to give Woodcroft a +1, which I'm not opposed to doing, I have to do it for his power stance. Have you seen the way he stands during his media conferences? Those are the best. That's the best thing ever. Like it's so, and he did it on day one and he's super confident. I'll give him that. Like when they say, somebody asked him in a media conference today, he's like, are you getting comfortable with being called head coach? And he didn't say, oh, that's where he's like, yep. You know what I mean? Like he's confident, like he gets it, and he stands that way, and he acts that way, and he talks that way. He
exudes an energy that's such a remarkable contrast to Tippett, right? Like just standing up at the podium, being up and down the bench, talking to players. Like you can just tell this is an entirely new environment that he's brought in.
Yeah, I'm hoping they respond really well to it. So far, they seem to be. Brian, what about you? +1, -1, both? What do you think?
Well, these boys took my first 2 choices, so I'm just going to go with Stuart Skinner because he's Stuart Skinner and he gets shutouts. That's what he does.
That's it.
There you go. Short and sweet. I'm going to go with Zach Hyman. 1, because I love that he finally got a goal here in a little bit of time. 2, because if you watch that game yesterday and he took that stick in the chin and then he like half bit his tongue off, he goes off the ice, he gets stitched up, he comes back and he's like tasting his tongue. If you can see me on video, I'm like, yeah. That's what he's doing. Like he is the quintessential hockey player. Like he just absolutely never stops. He's a machine. He's a trainer.
Told you guys would love him.
Yeah, I bet. And to the point where he's like, it doesn't matter what happens to him. Like, and we've had guys on the team like that before. Ryan Smith is one of them. Jason Smith is another.
Yep.
Like those are guys that you can't really do anything unless you really, really injure them, that they're not coming out, right? Hyman came out, got his tongue fixed up, came back on, played really well, gets a goal. Like, how do you not love a guy like that, right? Like that absolutely is a +1 for me. I don't think there's been a -1 so far in these 3 games. Like I haven't noticed anybody really stand out in a negative way. I am a little concerned for Devin Shore. I don't know what the future is for him on this team. He didn't play very many minutes the other night. It was the first game that he played of the 3 under Woodcroft against Los Angeles. I have a feeling we might not see him much anymore.
Yeah, probably not. I hope they don't move him because I think the contract is, usable down even for next year, right? But I don't know if he's going to get much playing time.
Brian, what do you think about the guys that Woodcroft didn't really have these relationships with, like the Devin Shores, the Brendan Perlini, stuff like that? We haven't seen much of these guys. Do you think that continues?
Yeah, I was really interested to see what happened with Shore last night because he wasn't in the lineup. He took out Benson, who I thought has played really well, and Benson is, you would think, a Woodcroft guy, having developed under him. So he takes him out to put in Shore, and then he plays Shore only 2.5 minutes when he's only got 10 other forwards. So, like, to me, that's the one thing that I haven't really kind of been able to wrap my head around about Woodcroft's decision so far. I don't know what to make of that. And I would agree that his future here, there's certainly it's very cloudy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll see. I figured it was a back-to-back thing, but
honorable mention to the Bison King for snapping his goal with Stroud as well.
Yeah, you know what? And Colin, I'll ask you this. I mean, he hasn't scored a lot lately, but I still think he's been very effective. How much does it matter that he's back up there with McDavid now?
A ton. I think at the start of the year, those two seem to like gel really well together. And I don't think like Jesse's struggles kind of seemed like I was always kind of wanting them to put him back with Connor just to see if it could get him going again. And like you said, I think even when he wasn't scoring, he still does a lot of things well. Like he's really good defensively. I don't know if he really gets talked about enough for that. But like he's just a really good player, and hopefully that goal can get him filling the back of the net more often again.
I think I said it in the last show before Woodcroft really did his thing that I was the most excited for what line combinations he might think are obvious ones. And one of those was for me was putting Puljujärvi back up there. And he did. And it's already paying off. I think it was a very, very smart and to me, very logical, easy decision to make. But for whatever reason, Tippett wasn't making it. So good for him that he's back up there and he's produced already and he's playing really well. All right, guys, that's where we'll leave it for this week. Appreciate everybody coming on, doing one day later than we normally do because of the Oilers schedule. And we might have to do this again next week. We'll see what all goes on. But for everybody else who's watching this has been another edition of the Hockey Writers Oilers Overtime. For Colton, Julia, and Brian, and myself, Jim Parsons, thanks. And we'll talk to you guys next week.